Ambassador Akbar Ahmed is my guest today. He's the chair of Islamic Studies at American University here in Washington. He was Pakistan's ambassador to the UK at one time. Dr. Ahmed advised U.S. military leaders and diplomats. He wrote a great number of books on Islam and America's relations with the Muslim world. His latest book is called The Thistle and the Drone: How America's War on Terror Became a Global War on Tribal Islam. Dr. Ahmed, before we talk about the remote lands where the drones strike and kill, I want to talk about homegrown terror. Post 9/11, the U.S. has been all over the map chasing terrorists. But then you see terror growing right here in the U.S., in a well-educated area like Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm referring to the Boston bombers, of course. What slipped through the cracks in America's understanding of terror?
This is a new phenomena, a new social phenomena, and a challenge. When people say homegrown terrorists, they really mean Muslims, Muslim youth, boys or young people who were born here or grew up here in the United States and have turned against the United States. I believe that several causes are to be identified. You have the problem of youth growing up in a culture not their own, which means many of these boys are from the Middle East or South Asia, or in the case of the Boston bombers, from the Caucasus, from Dagestan, Chechnya. They're growing in a culture which sort of accepts them and sort of doesn't. So there's some resistance, even in local culture.
But by so many accounts, they did fit in.
No, they fit, as I said, they fit in on one level. On another level, they don't. Just take the example of the two Boston bombers or of the other previous homegrown terrorists. They're hearing around them so much talk of Islamophobia, so many attacks on their religion, on their Quran, on their culture, not necessarily on a religious level. So their response is not an Islamic response necessarily, it's also a cultural response. And the same phenomena can be seen in the UK, where you have many of these young British-born Muslims growing up in the UK, being accepted, playing cricket, going to the pub and so on, and yet being involved in terrorism. So they're not, thankfully, many of these, but there are cases, and these cases, I really believe, are a consequence of several failures of society. Larger society, not being able to integrate them fully, their own community not being able to detect who they are and then give them a certain direction.
With the Boston bomber, intelligence warnings were there. The guy did not really hide his radical views, and there's a sense that the authorities did not pursue him, and I mean Tamerlan Tsarnaev, well enough because he did not fit into their profile of who would be a jihadi, probably thinking that it would be someone with maybe a Yemeni background. Can you talk about the danger of profiling in law enforcement?
Well, I've been in charge of law and order myself in the tribal areas of Pakistan, in Balochistan, and those are the most difficult areas to administer. We were taught that you need to learn when the cat is about to jump and where it will jump. So when you profile in this broad way that you mentioned, it may be all Middle East looking people and we only look at them, then our mentality is that, well, all right, if someone is blue-eyed or blonde hair, he could not be a terrorist. And as we know, terrorism comes in every form, every shape. We've had many terrorist strikes in the United States of people who were not Muslim. Timothy McVeigh is just one famous example, but many of these were local people who were not Muslim. So the aim should be to prevent violence, whoever is committing it.
There is a perception that terror grows where there is a lack of education. True, to a certain extent. But there's something that a lot of people don't understand. Like people like Anwar al-Awlaki, right? An American citizen. He was killed in a drone strike in Yemen, graduated from George Washington University, presumably well-read. So it's not like he hasn't read into what Islam is about. And then this Tamerlan Tsarnaev, he majored in philosophy, so he probably too did some reading. But why do they find what they find in Islam?
Well, let me respond to that. It's a very good question. First, the assumption that education means a person is compassionate or sensible or pluralist or inclusive is not really correct. Secondly, that is coming from Islam is equally not correct. Perhaps the most terrible example in recent history is what the Germans did to the Jewish community in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. Do you know that something like 25 to 30% of the SS, which was the most vicious of the German Nazi party, they were actually PhDs or they had MAs, or higher education degrees. Where did that leave their humanity? They were completely unsympathetic to the Jewish community. So again, they thought they were representing a higher civilization. So we have to be very careful about making these generalizations. Very often, these people acting as they do, which is completely unacceptable and to be condemned, these acts of violence, they're coming out of their own broken societies, the lack of guidance they're getting, and their distorted, mutated understanding of Islam.
Drones, America's new tool in the war on terror. Some argue if there were no drones, they would still go after the suspected terrorists using other vehicles, other jets. There would still be missiles and hits. What difference did drones really make, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, the debate around drones has just started. Now, the problem as I see it is it's one-sided. There's one side of the debate, which is how Americans see the usefulness of drones. What they're not seeing is the impact the drones are having across the world on local tribes, local communities, where entire communities are being shattered. So you may have 1 or 2 or 3 intended targets being killed, the bad guys, but then you have 100, 200, 300 completely innocent people being killed, women, children, and these are recorded. You can look up the Stanford University report, New York University, United Nations. There are many, many reports on this confirming this. I have interviewed people in Waziristan, so I have that information in the book. Now, what that is doing is that creates hundreds of more enemies. So you take out one enemy and you end up by creating 100 more enemies.
Speaking of the debate, as drones moved into the mainstream and they received quite a bit of attention in the US media lately, I felt like the main point of these discussions was still whether or not the drones should kill American citizens, whether or not they should kill at all, without due process, in absolute secrecy. That seemed to be, it remained on the sidelines of the discussion, seemed to be beside the point. What was your sense?
My sense was, you're absolutely right, my sense was that Americans tend to be very ethnocentric when dealing with this issue. So it's all about Americans, we are keeping Americans safe. They're not really connecting this with the people across the world who are being killed as a result of the drone strikes. Now, I'm sure that debate will come because Americans are people who have a great social conscience, and once they pick up an idea, they feel there's injustice, they pick it up themselves and they'll go for it. And that will happen. Right now, it's not happening. And we have to understand that when you have a place like Waziristan, which is the focus of my book, small place, already impoverished, tribal societies, no hospitals, no roads, no educational facilities, and you hit it with drones again and again and again, they've ended up by killing over 3,000 people in Waziristan alone. And think of the impact on a small society, small tribal society. It just rips that society apart. And in that vacuum, you will have these violent, angry killers, as you call them, who then go down to Karachi or Lahore in the bigger cities and blow themselves up. And they say this. In one case, they killed a young boy, 10-year-old boy, in a mosque in GHQ, the son of an officer, Pakistan Army officer, and they killed him and said, now you know how we feel and what we go through every day.
In your book, The Thistle and the Drone, you write about how the U.S. props up central governments, which then go out and fight the tribes, which is true for Afghanistan, true for Yemen, true for Pakistan. What is it? Is it that the U.S. doesn't understand tribal societies or doesn't want to understand?
The war on terror, as I see it, based on my research of these 40 societies, is really a triangle. You could call it the triangle of terror. So you have the United States at one point, you have the central government at another point, and the third point is tribal society. And in the discussion so far, we don't really hear about tribal society. So very often it's the United States and the central government in alliance against Al-Qaeda or the militants, and that's all. What we don't realize is, Gyan, and this is a very important point, that these terrorists are coming out of societies which have nothing to do with supporting them. In fact, they are the victims now. So they're being killed by the drones. They're being killed by their own armies, their own central government armies looking for terrorists. And they're being blown up by the suicide bombers themselves in their own societies. There's violence. Young children are not able to sleep at night because they complain about the drone. They say it's buzzing overhead all the time. they're neurotic, they're angry, they're anxious. To the Americans, you asked the question about why aren't the Americans getting it. I really think Americans don't understand tribal society. Tribal society lies underneath the vast number of Muslim populations, right across from Morocco into the Middle East and up into the Caucasus. So the code of honor of these tribes, the code of honor of revenge, honor, hospitality, all these are very important in defining that society. Not so much Islam, more the tribal code. And there you have a very interesting dynamic, a kind of internal tension which hasn't been resolved after centuries.
Also about Pakistan. The government there condemns U.S. strikes in very strong terms, but at the same time allows them. That kind of a two-faced policy, is it sustainable?
It is not. And I've mentioned this in the book. I've called it duplicitous. And it is duplicitous because on the one hand, they're telling the Pakistani public, we have nothing to do with this, and we don't even know about it. On the other hand, they're allowing the Americans to go ahead with the drone strikes. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, I've quoted him in the book, told the American diplomats that I will object, I'll go to Parliament and I'll object and I'll say this is a terrible thing. An American shouldn't be doing this. We condemn it for national honor and so on, but go ahead with it. Now, the people of Pakistan are not dumb or not stupid, so they understand the game. But ultimately, again, you have to ask yourself, does it help law and order? Does it help stability and peace in that area? And does it help check the men of violence? And the answer is no, it doesn't help check the men of violence, because the men of violence then say, these drones are being operated by Americans who are the enemy and the government is helping them. We will now target all government institutions, including schools.
Then why isn't Pakistan saying a real no?
I think a weak government, I think weak character, all these persuade them that it's better to be tactful, it's better to stay in power without being under any pressure. It takes a lot of courage to stand up to a superpower and say, guys, we may be your friends, but you're messing it up, and you're messing it up for us. It takes a lot of courage.
Afghanistan past 2014, is it going to move back to the rule of tribes?
That's a very important question, and as someone who has lived there and worked with the tribes, Afghanistan is going to face a lot of challenges, both internally and regionally.
But you're saying the structure of their society is tribal, so maybe it is like a natural way for them to go back to their tribal.
That's a great question, because as an anthropologist, I would say yes, straight away. But don't forget what's happened in Afghanistan. First, the Soviet invasion of the 1980s, disruption of their tribal structure. The chiefs, the elders, the religious structure, all disrupted. The central government, the king of Afghanistan, all disrupted. So you have a tribal society in a state of disruption. Then the 1990s with the Taliban, more disruption. Then you have 9/11 and the American invasion, more disruption. So 3 decades later, that tribal society which you're talking about really is very, very different, and you have mutations of the tribal code, mutations of Islam. And from those mutations, you see violence, violence, violence.
Thank you.
Thank you again.